University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. I'm here to talk today about ecopsychology and healing our emotional split with the planet. I know a lot of you probably know about all the environmental issues that we're facing right now, and it can be very daunting. It can be stressful, it can cause anxiety, and it can be super tempting to just run away from all those feelings and go back to your normal life and go about things the way that they are, but that's part of the huge issue that we're facing right now, and if we don't address those issues, we're going to fall into a deeper trap of environmental issues and destruction. So I'm here to talk today about how do we address those emotions and flip it into taking community action, being inspired, and feeling a little bit more positive about the world that we're living in. So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Some of the items that we're going to discuss today, as I said, we're going to introduce the topic of ecopsychology. My two passions are the environment and psychology. So ecopsychology is really interesting to me because I get to fit my two passions into one. We're going to do a little bit of brainstorming and reflection on what are ways that you feel when you talk about environmental issues and what are feelings that come about in your own life. I'm going to have a little bit of time for group discussion. We'll talk about understanding our emotions, developing resilience, and then some next steps that we can take and concluding thoughts. Some of the goals of the activity are recognizing the disconnects that humans presently have with the planet. We're going to discuss some of the consequences that we probably already see when we are disconnected from our environment. We're going to identify our psychological responses to climate change, so things like stress, anxiety, or it can be things like hope and resilience. We're also going to analyze our personal relationships with the world around us and how do we interact with the world around us in a more positive way. And then lastly, developing how to discover psychological resilience and emotional resilience so that we can act more effectively in our communities. How many of you have heard of the term ecopsychology before? Have any of you heard of the term ecopsychology? Okay, only a few of you. So ecopsychology combines the environment and psychology. As many of you know, psychology is identifying the relationship that we have with ourselves and how do we interact interpersonally, how do we interact with humans around us. Ecopsychology, when we have that eco at the front of it, it stretches that psychology definition a little bit further, and it identifies the relationships that human beings have with our natural world. We also look at how we understand our emotional connections between individuals and the natural world around us. One really interesting thing is that ecopsychology combines the elements of ecology and psychology, so ecological and psychological principles, and it seeks to develop and understand a way of expanding the emotional connections that individuals have. So there, individuals can develop more sustainable lifestyles and remedy their alienation with nature by understanding their emotions and having a more psychological connection with their emotions and with the earth around them. One thing that we need to ask ourselves, this is one of the Earth's largest, biggest questions. What are we doing for others, ourselves, and the environment around us? It can seem kind of daunting because it may be hard to act at times. You may feel paralyzed by either fear, anxiety, or there's just a lot going on. We all do a lot in our daily lives. So it is a big question, but it is something to think about. And I want to give this time for a little bit of reflection. You can take some time to do some deep breathing, take some time to write some thoughts down, take some time to talk to the person next to you. Feel free to just reflect. But when we look at these two things, one thing I want to ask you, when you think of the word restorative, what are images, places, people, or objects that come into mind? The word restorative. What does this space look like? What does this space sound like? What does the space smell like? Is there something specifically about a restorative space that pulls or draws you in? What are the bodily sensations that you have in this restorative space? How does the ground feel beneath your feet? Is there anything that really brings you into that restorative space? Something that makes you feel comfortable. You can close your eyes if that feels more comfortable for you to do some reflecting, but try to pick out that restorative place for you. And then the second thing I want you to think about is the environment around you. How does it make you feel when the environment around you is not being treated properly? When the environmental concerns around an issue are not present? When you think about hard environmental issues that you may be facing yourself, something that you fight for, something that you're really passionate about, How does that make you feel when others aren't necessarily in that same wavelength as you? They're not recognizing the feelings that you may be having, maybe ignoring the things that you're saying or the really important ideas that you're presenting to them. Identify in your head some of those thoughts and feelings. This can be issues like climate change, burning of fossil fuels, animal agriculture, deforestation, very large environmental issues that we all face daily, but there are ways to face these issues. One thing that I want you to remember is stay inspired. When we heal the earth, we do heal ourselves. There's a lot of talk and a lot of science and a lot of studies done that show when our environment is well and when the environment that we walk around, study, spend time in, when that environment is healthy, we oftentimes reap the benefits of that health as well, both in our psychological well-being and in our physical well-being as well. So now I'll have some time for you to work, and you can either work with yourself if you feel more comfortable talking with yourself, if you know the people next to you, or if you want to make a friend with the person next to you. I'm just going to give a little bit of time where you can write some thoughts down, have some reflection. So in small groups, just complete the following sentences. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of a pretext. Looking at the crisis from a global scale, this can bring complex challenges to our lifestyles and thinking when we talk about issues like climate change. Typical responses to climate change and environmental destruction can be to feel paralyzed. We try to drown out the alarm bells, and we continue to go about our daily lives and our daily motions, but this is part of the larger issue when we go about in our modern society. When we disconnect from the emergency at hand, we are not prepared for what is coming. So when we disconnect further from our emotional responses, we're disconnecting further from the earth around us. The first step to developing psychological resilience is becoming aware of our emotional responses, especially to things like climate change and environmental issues that we do face. So just take some time with yourself, take some time for the next few minutes. I'm going to give you some time by yourself to do a little bit of reflecting, because I do want you to take some time. Even if you don't have a notebook, you can jot some thoughts down in your head, or if you have a cell phone or anything and you want to write some thoughts down. But these are the 4 prompts that I have for you. When I think about what is happening in the world, I feel that can be anxious, it can be inspired, it can be scared, it can be hopeful, it can be a lot of things, whatever you think fits that sentence for you. The second one is the feelings I find difficult to tolerate are, it can be stress, it can be overwhelming uncertainty, because oftentimes with environmental issues that is something that we are facing, is the uncertain of what is going to happen. The third one is the way that I deal with these feelings is by how do you normally respond to your emotions? I mean, even if you don't normally connect with your emotions on a deeper level, what are ways that you respond to this? Do you respond in a way that you want to go out and act? Do you respond in a way that you want to lay down in bed and just hide away from your feelings, which a lot of people, that is a common response. What are ways that you feel when you're dealing with these tough feelings? And then the last one, what inspires me about living at this time of crisis? So give yourself some time to reflect on those 4 things. You can talk to the person next to you. Feel free to make a new friend. Feel free to ask others how they're feeling about this if you're having a hard time identifying your emotions. I really just want you to dive deep into your emotions a little bit and try to figure out how you're feeling when you talk about hard environmental topics like this. What are ways that you deal with those emotions?
Well, I would say when I'm here, yes.
Yeah, feel free to talk.
You'll see a lot of solutions.
Yeah, avoid the conflict.
I feel like I think that it's much back to the real world. But it's more we get to feel
Right.
there's a lot more on the cards for
But it's not like the more I
Yeah, I think usually what I feel is, or think is, frustration. Almost, the longer I've done this and the more I've learned, the more pessimistic I feel. And it's frustrating because it always feels like it's the problems are too big, and your impact is really matters. So it's really challenging to come to terms with it.
See, and that's where I was just saying, like, I just shut down. I go like that. And because I see Taylor that way, she gets very frustrated because she thinks, oh my God, this is not one piece. So my easy.
Yeah, and a lot of people do that, and I think it's, that's the feeling you find most difficult to tolerate, or just that, like sadness, that kind of weight that it feels like it applies to you, And I feel angry a lot, like I get angry and upset that people are sometimes willfully, people that have the ability to control things are willfully. I've even seen politicians come out and literally say in public that they don't care because in 20 years they'll be dead. And they're supposed to be looking at this. It's really.
And I would say
We're going to take about one more minute, so just wrap up some of your thoughts.
our sadness, because the things that she makes us watch, I know that they're very sad. Like some of the animals.
Biodiversity loss is really what got me started on it. When I started reading about species extinction, that really got me. Like that got me really passionate about this area because I felt so much like sadness to identify it. So the way I deal with it is usually not productive or constructive, but I at least have the opportunity with the job that I have to channel energy into making a difference. That's what I try to tell all the students too. I'm like, the only impact you'll ever be able to make is the impact within your circle of influence. And your best bet is to try to grow that circle of influence as widely as you can so you have a bigger impact. And that's all any of us can do.
Say that thing over, and he wanted to just a little tiny. She's making an impact.
If I could bring everybody back, that would be great. Thank you so much for participating, and I know I saw a lot of people just saying hello to the person next to them and identifying some of the feelings that they may be having. I want to give this time to allow you to share some of your thoughts if you feel comfortable with doing that, if you want to share. So the three things I want to point out: what are some of the emotional responses that you had that may have surprised you? What was something that you identified that you didn't expect? What was something that alarmed you? Was there something a response that you had that triggered something deeper that you really didn't realize was a way that you were feeling about the environment or a way that you were responding to these things? And lastly, just emotional responses that you may have had that you didn't really know, emotional responses that you originally, the way that you react to things. Is there anything that jumped out to you, anything that alarmed you, surprised you? I know when I talk to my dad about environmental things, we stand on very different spectrums of the environmental world, and oftentimes when trying to introduce new ideas to him and trying to have a conversation, I shut down and I get very angry because he doesn't have the same opinion as me and doesn't view things the same way I do and doesn't appreciate the opinion that I have and doesn't always seem to be very open to new ideas. And that can be very hard when you're talking to someone that isn't very open to environmental things, especially in our time of crisis when we're dealing with some huge environmental issues. It can be very tempting to shut down and feel angry, and that was something that definitely surprised me when I was thinking of some of the emotional responses that I have myself. Is there anything that jumped out to any of you? I just wanted to give some time for reflection. It could be anything.
I'll start it out.
Go for it.
Deflecting by being a sarcastic asshole.
Perfect. That's perfect. And oftentimes comedy and sarcasm and humor is how people deal with tough issues. It's a very, very popular one. Yes.
It was interesting to hear that I'm not the only one who's feeling utter panic and terror right now.
Exactly. Yes. And that's what's so important about a workshop like this. I'm so glad that you're all here in this space with me, because it's very important to know that we're not alone. We're not alone in this fight, and we're not alone in facing some of these big, large issues that can seem very panicky and cause anxiety. Yes.
I wanted to know if we could bring up, like, you know, we've all, like, our personal lives, and you see stuff on the, like, on the news. I mean, and even for myself,
Of course.
when I deal with stuff, I feel anxious. Sometimes I talk about it. Sometimes I just want to pull my ticket out and cry.
Yeah.
And then I have a little boy that's in foster care, and I see different stuff, you know, in the way the system, they treat mothers,
Yeah.
and how they treat people with disabilities, and, you know, then you hear stuff about kids, and it's sad, you know.
And all of that
Sometimes-
is intense. So it could be very overwhelming. Like you said, I've definitely succumbed to, I'm just gonna go home and I'm gonna take a nap. I'm gonna go sleep. I'm gonna not dealing with these issues, because you want to bury it. You want to put that stuff away because it's intense and it's definitely hard to deal with. Yes.
I want to rescue that person by educating them and showing them the real truth. And quite often it's like, ching, they don't want to know my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm going to rescue them. I'm so going to make sure that they're taken care of. Don't you see the truth? You know, and it's very frustrating. I ask them to do that and be totally frustrated. But I have to realize I can't necessarily rescue those people if it's okay the way they're doing.
Yeah. It can be extremely frustrating. Yes.
I feel like there are a lot of people that cover it up, like they just kind of pretend it's not happening, and like environmental change or that their daily use of certain products can have a huge impact overall. If 500,000 people are using a plastic bag every day, a new one, I mean, it really adds up. And I think a lot of people just put a mask on it and think it's not happening.
Yeah. I've definitely met people. I'm 21, and I've met people that, it's not going to face me. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. I don't need to worry about it. I'm not going to have kids. It doesn't matter. I don't care about so-and-so and this and that. And that definitely does happen, and it can be extremely frustrating, because you want to point out to those people that if we did all act in a certain way, it could definitely have a huge impact, because on our own, we can do a lot. Yes.
The feelings I find difficult to tolerate, at first I said willful ignorance in others, but then it struck me as a judgmental nature on myself to say it's their fault, why don't they change, it's them, that, you know, it's in us, we're right, and then, or I'm right and you're wrong, and it seems like that's kind of what society is stuck in right now, is a lack of engagement with each other, so you inspire me with this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, exactly. And I find myself in that position too, with my father, and we have those different opinions, and we may have different behaviors, but I'm also judging him because of the way that he thinks, and may not have the same opinion as me, but we need to have that engagement. We need to educate each other, and we need to act together. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, I want to add that I've struggled in the past with feeling like, you know, you just want to shake somebody and like, how can you not understand this, you know? And it's really easy, especially once you become woke, you know, that you get pissed off and frustrated, and you can kind of talk down to people and use negative language. And I found that, you know, when I do that, it turns people off. You know, they don't respond well, and then they check out, and then they don't want to hear what you have to say. And so I've realized that when it comes to educating people, if the goal is to make them hear you and try and let in what you're saying, that you have to, as much as you might want to shake them and say, why don't you understand this, you still have to take that step back and talk from a place of love and positivity to try and get them to understand what you're saying.
Exactly. Thank you, Sarah. And with what Sarah said, like when you educate others and maybe having a hard conversation with someone who may not have the same opinion as you, one thing that we'll talk about later in the presentation is when you do educate people, you can be assertive and you can be informative, but you don't want to be aggressive. You don't want to be angry, and you can't let sometimes your inner emotions that you may be feeling towards these environmental issues, you can't necessarily let that bubble up. because projecting your negative emotions on others will not solve these issues either. So thank you so much. Is there anything else before we, yes?
Yeah, I worry that, humans in general, we don't even, we're making progress, we think, but it's hard for me to believe that we know what the best outcome would be. And I think about, like, last night, there are probably a bunch of people here who camped. Like, there's a reason we like to come to camp, perhaps. We like to be in nature where it's quiet and peaceful, where we don't have to deal with things. And I remember a train came through, I'm like, oh, well, that's annoying. That train's burning fossil fuels, it's waking me up, it's disturbing my peace. And I'm like, well, at least we're out here in nature. Like, humans like to be camping in nature. And then all of a sudden, someone's car alarm goes off. And I'm like, well, this is what happens when we love the environment. We want to have a nice environment for camping. Like, we find another way to move it up. And that feels, that's difficult to know, like, if we're even going to hit humans even, like, hit the right outcome.
Exactly, like the uncertainty, like I talked about, and having that paradigm of our daily lives with the lives that we want to live, being environmentally conscious and being involved with nature more. It's a very hard situation to go about. So we're going to talk about how do we address some of those negative emotions and what are the most common responses to some of these large environmental issues. The three most prevalent responses to large environmental issues like climate change are these three things: disconnection, projection, and repression. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into those so that you have a little bit more information. But disconnection, repression, and projection. When we talk about disconnection, we are ignoring the alarm signals. We're taking a nap and burying ourselves in that place where we're disconnecting ourselves. We're just going about our modern society, our modern daily lives, and that's part of the larger issue because we're further disconnecting ourselves from the issues that we're facing. And then, like I said, when we disconnect ourselves, we're not prepared to act against these challenges in a meaningful way. When we talk about projection, I'm sure a lot of us have already had an experience with projection where maybe there's something else going on in your life and you yell at your best friend and that your best friend didn't do anything to you, but really it's those negative emotions that you have bubbled up because of a different issue and you're projecting it onto them. And this can deepen our anger and pain, and it can oftentimes even sever relationships because you're projecting those negative emotions onto other people when you're really not meaning to project those negative emotions because they're not the root cause of that issue. And then the last one is repression, hiding our feelings from other people. Oftentimes in society, even in different cultures, we're not supposed to connect with our deeper feelings. It's not appropriate to show emotion, when really we need to connect with our emotions more to be able to act more meaningfully and to be able to understand ourselves and those around us so that we can act more meaningfully, especially meaningfully with the environment around us and be more stewards of the earth. And this can lead up to a buildup of stress because when we repress those issues, it builds up and builds up and builds up, and one day we can get sick, we can get psychologically distressed, and a lot more worse negative things can happen if we continue to repress those issues. So the biggest thing we need to do is develop emotional resilience. When we talk about emotional resilience, it's derived from ecology. When we talk about ecology, that's the ability of a system to transform in times of hard times and times of challenge so that it can survive. Like plants and animals and the environment around us, we change and we become resilient and we transform so that we can survive in the world that we're living in because we are equipped to do that when we educate ourselves and we pay attention to the ways that we're feeling so that we can act meaningfully. It's also a spin on the term psychology. When we're equipped to act meaningfully, when we're challenged by changes around us, we can act in a meaningful way so that we can create change and we can act positively in our communities. And this is my favorite part of the presentation. When we talk about resilience, it's like finding the eye in the storm. When we talk about the eye in the storm, it's that calm place inside yourself. Think about wherever that calm place is for you. I know for me, it's right in my stomach and right in my lungs. And when I feel most centered, it's that calm place inside myself, even though I'm feeling that outer chaos, even though my body may feel anxious, I may be feeling psychological distress, maybe the environment around me is not doing well and I'm just experiencing a lot of chaos and anxiety and overwhelmingness because there's so much going on. But inside myself, I can find that eye in the storm, because there is always the eye in the storm. And you can find that calm, centered place inside yourself so that you can act meaningfully and act in a resilient way. So here are some tips for addressing your immediate emotional responses. A lot of you probably know some of these things, but the biggest one, remind yourself. Remind yourself that the earth is always changing. Yes, we do have an impact on the earth around us, and that's why we need to acknowledge our actions and the way that we interact with the world around us. But we do need to know that we're not fighting this alone. You're in a room of people right now that are feeling the same way that you are. We identified a lot of the ways that we're feeling now. We may be feeling frustrated, anxious, really panicky and unsure of what is going to happen. But we do need to remind ourselves that the earth is changing and we're not fighting this alone. One thing that you can do is educate others. Present clear but not overwhelming information. Like I said, you can be assertive but not aggressive. One thing that you can do is educate yourself on the full system. If there's something about climate change or something about the environment that you're not fully understood or you're not fully knowledgeable about, go out and do further research to get a full spectrum idea of that issue or that thing that you may be facing. Do research on what others have done, on what is successful and what is not successful. Things that other systems that may be in other parts of the world that people are finding solutions to some of these larger issues. We also want to model behaviors. Obviously, all of you are at a renewable energy fair, so I'm sure a lot of you are environmentally conscious and try to be environmentally conscious in your daily life. But model the behaviors that you want others to follow. But also share your difficulties with others. Don't hide from those feelings. Don't hide from those. Maybe I know I've experienced flooding in my community. Don't hide from those things. Tell those stories, share those difficulties, but also share those successes and those rewards when you do have environmental successes and things that are positive in your community. And lastly, make sure that you connect. Pay close attention to that connection between evidence, hope, and community action or personal action. One thing that I want you to know is let the world know why you're here and do it with passion. That is one of my favorite quotes because we all have the power to create action in our community, whether it's personally in your own life and doing things in your own daily life to create change, educating others in your community to learn new ways of creating action or creating action in a group or in a larger setting. Make sure that you let the world know why you're here and do it with passion. Don't stray away from the things that you're passionate about. I know that oftentimes when I have environmental conversations with people, my voice gets louder and inflected and people oftentimes think that I'm angry with them or they are unsure of the way that I'm feeling, but really it's just me being passionate and I don't shy away from that. And you shouldn't shy away from something that you're passionate about, especially if it's environmental wellness. So today we're going to commit ourselves to 3 goals. Again, I'm going to give some time for writing or reflection, or you can even talk with the people next to you again. So today we're going to commit ourselves to 3 goals moving forward. The first one, today I will commit to. This can be, today I'm going to commit to going home and starting a Facebook group with some of my community members about climate change. Maybe it's going to my community library and doing further research on an environmental topic that I don't know a lot about. Maybe it's I'm going to go home and have a conversation with my dad about an environmental topic that we may have differences on, but we're going to have that conversation and we're going to meet a common ground and we're going to have a positive interaction because we need to have those relationships. We can't shy away even when we may have different opinions. The second one is I will do this by, that can be committing yourself to 30 minutes of research a day. It can be committing yourself to starting a community action group and meeting once a week, setting up the first meeting for your community action group. It can be going out and maybe leading a cleanup in your community and doing something to actually benefit the environment right now and something that you can reap the benefits from right away. And then the last one, I will address my emotional responses to climate change by, that can be doing further research on what denial means. What can I do to, when I'm repressing my feelings, how can I fix that? How can I come out of something like repression? How do I fix projecting my feelings onto others? How do I alter those relationships? Maybe I've already severed a relationship with someone because I projected my negative feelings onto someone. And I'll do further research on how to fix that relationship or have that conversation with them and tell them that I'm sorry, I was projecting my negative feelings that I had built up, but now I understand. I have a better understanding of myself, and I want to remedy this with you. So just take the next couple minutes, try to commit yourself to a goal for each of these things. Feel free to talk with the neighbor next to you. Feel free to just do it internally if that feels better for you. But I'm just going to take the next couple minutes to give you some time to do that.
So, I really need to do better things. Not even some of just those so little by little, getting into our so that's something that we should talk
Yeah, I think trying to, well, I mean, usually what we're looking at, like, coming to terms with kind of where I'm at, like, taking a step back and what I'm able to do to make things have the impact I want to have. And I think I need to commit to acknowledging the good, not focusing just focus on the accomplishments that I'm going to do. And, kind of be intentional about reporting those accomplishments.
I know you mentioned
Celebrate.
this morning that's like
Yeah, and I mean, by the time I leave that position after 4 years, it might be somewhat imperceptible that a difference is made, but it's something, at least it's moving, there's progress. It's not just showing up once a month at a meeting, talking about stuff, bitching about stuff, receiving. We actually did and are continuing to actually do things that matter. So I think I need to kind of almost be more intentional about writing out, recording what I'm able to accomplish, and taking time to recognize them. We kind of do that at the end of the year anyway, and I haven't done the last couple of years recording our accomplishments. But that's it doesn't even have to be just like work related. Just like whatever. It's easy to always get fixated on the negative side, whatever it is, or areas that my emotional response to the climate change, I often just get really angry and frustrated. I'm trying to find ways to model behavior better.
Wrap up some of your thoughts.
Live what I believe in. And then, just find ways to start to Taylor, this is Climate Radio. They do a thing at the end of their podcast where they talk about comments and stuff that people say about it, how you respond to it in a constructive way. And I thought it was really helpful. And you're not just getting mad at them for things that stupid stuff or something. That's fine. I don't know. What do you commit to today? It's good. It's sort of, right?
If we want to come back together, that would be great.
Yeah, she doesn't really need that though. Her voice carries.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to just commit yourself, hopefully to just even one goal. If you commit yourself to one goal, that would be great. I see a lot of you taking pictures of the slides. Please feel free to do that. If you want to take away goals with you, quotes, different definitions, anything like that, please feel free to do all of that. Is there anyone that would like to share a goal that they committed themselves to? It could be anything. It could be any one of the three. Yes.
I'm committing to buying floss in cardboard containers instead of plastic containers.
That's awesome. And everyone, she's committing to buying floss in cardboard containers instead of plastic containers. That's great. Anybody else? Yeah.
I promise that I will commit to use these bags and not the plastic ones for my grocery shop.
Yes, you're committing to using reusable bags at the grocery store instead of the plastic ones. That's my mother. I've been trying to convince her forever. So thank you so much for saying that. Anybody else?
Recycle.
Yeah, recycle. Great. Yeah, Lisa.
I commit to trying to procrastinate less because that's an emotion that I have. Procrastinate it off. So no one likes me to do something that I put off.
That's a great one. I didn't even think about procrastination, but procrastination is huge. When we deal with some of those hard emotions and some of those hard issues, it can be so easy to just put it off. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it the next week, but that's great. Thank you so much. Yes.
I have one friend who, I don't know why we are good friends because there's nothing in agreement except we like mint ice cream. But our idea is to be nice to them and to try to educate them, inform him, whatever, talk about things in a nice way and not rude.
That's great. That's fantastic. There's always going to be somebody that we do butt heads with. It does happen. So that's great. Anything else? Yes.
I'm going to be sure and let myself have fun as well. Do things that are fun and have a balance between doing the work in quotes, and also allowing myself some fun.
That's huge. Having fun. We need to have fun. Thank you so much. Did you have a thought?
I'm going to rev up the carpooling effort at our church.
Yes, carpooling. Revving up the carpooling efforts. Is there anything else that anyone would like? Yes.
Yeah, I will commit to being kinder when I perceive apathy by remembering that we were all once ignorant.
Yes.
And still are often, and being mindful of the sacrifices and kindness of others that allowed me to change.
That's huge. Thank you so much. We are all ignorant, and there is always something new to learn. So that is a great point. Thank you so much for sharing. Anything else that anyone would like to share? Yes.
I just want to say that I'm going to commit to not turning a blind eye when I'm at work with somebody who doesn't care as much and saying, hey, you should have recycled that. Can you find the recycling bin, over on the other side of the street or whatever the case may be, or telling coworkers, don't waste all that extra paper that you're using. You don't need it. Just giving those gentle hints to kind of keep people in mind of the factors that are important to everybody.
That's huge, especially when we see it in our daily life, like work and like in classes or in the people that you interact with every day, just giving slight reminders. Oh, you should have recycled that. Oh, you should waste less. Even if you go out to eat, wasting less food and things like that. That's a great point. Thank you so much for sharing. So continuing on, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but here are some ways to take effective direct action in your community. I know a lot of you are activists and environmental justice workers and things in your daily life, so I know a lot of you already do these things. But the biggest thing, number one, address policy making. Policies are the ways that we get things done and the ways that cities operate, businesses operate, schools operate, and policy is the way that we will make changes. So when you can go to community or sitting meetings on legislation and talk about sustainable initiatives. Here are some things to think about. You can think about infrastructure development, green space use, and access to healthy and clean community spaces. The other thing is you want to target education. Like we said, we're all ignorant, but the way that we come out of ignorance is through education. Educating others, educating your friends, educating your family members, educating the people around you that you see on the street, even the friends that you make at different events like this. I'm educating you about ecopsychology. So think about public education reform and some things to think about, sustainable development goals in schools, school garden initiatives, and more outdoor learning, bringing nature back into the education that we see and the education that we see every day. I'm going to be a teacher, so I hope to bring a lot of nature and outdoor learning into my classroom because I think it's extremely important. And then we learn from the environment, and we have that deeper connection with the environment. And lastly, you want to intervene and you want to challenge. Challenge the current systems that we have. We do have systems that tell us we need to act in certain ways, we need to buy certain things, we need to go about certain issues and follow certain legislations, but we can intervene and we can challenge those policies and those legislations. So think about ecosystem intervention, health intervention, infrastructure intervention. You want to challenge the behaviors of others, challenge the behaviors of yourselves. Think of ways that you could be more environmentally friendly or more sustainable. Challenge the legislation around you, and also challenge environmental destruction. That's the biggest one. If you see environmental destruction around you, make sure to challenge it, make sure to intervene. We can create change because we can do a lot personally. That's what I want you to remember. You are not alone on this fight, and you can do a lot personally. When you address those emotions, you understand yourself a little bit better. We can interact with the environment in a positive way by acting more meaningfully because we are equipped to face the challenges and the changes around us. Some of the concluding thoughts that I have for you. You do have the power to create change. You're here right now at a renewable energy fair, educating yourself on different environmental and sustainable topics to educate yourself further on the possibilities that are out there. So you can create change and you can be a positive factor in your community. Some of the challenges of climate change create adaptation and can cultivate creative ideas for transformation. One of the interesting things that I found, it says, the challenges of climate change and adaptation can cultivate creative ideas and actions in a way that transform and strengthen the resilience and creativity of individuals in that community. So when we transform, when we act together, when we understand our emotional reactions, we can actually cultivate creative solutions to the problems that we're facing, and we can be more equipped to act more meaningfully. And together, we can create a change. I don't know if any of you have heard of Eckhart Tolle, but he's a spiritual teacher, and it's someone that I hold very dear to my heart. And I've read many of his books, and one of the quotes here that I pulled out of his book, The Power of Now. We all need nature as our teacher to help reconnect with being. But not only does nature do we need nature, it also needs us. Sorry, I butchered that. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yes.
I would like to say that for you being a 21-year-old young woman being up there talking so eloquently about such deep issues in such a professional way like I am.
This stuff is not easy and it can seem very daunting. I know that I oftentimes, when dealing with environmental issues and hearing about new environmental destruction and things like that, I feel very anxious and I'm very uncertain of what is going to happen. But I know that when I address those emotions, when I understand what is going on around me, I can act meaningfully in my communities and with people around me when I have these conversations. Thank you so much for participating with me today. You guys were great. I hope that you committed yourself to a couple goals and you learned something about your emotional responses and that you feel more resilient when dealing with some of these issues. But thank you so much, Sarah. Yes.
Can you put the quote back?
Yes, of course.
Please, please.
And then I'll have my contact information on the last slide in case any of you want that as well. Yes, sir.
Are you at all familiar with polyvagal theory and the neurology of social engagement?
I have heard of it, but I have not done any research on it personally, so please enlighten me.
It's just they're finding out that the neurology that sustains our internal development, our vagal nerve and interoceptive awareness and digestive immune function, all of this is completely interconnected with the neurology of social engagement, which is facial nerve 5 and 7, trigeminal and facial, 9, 10, 11, glossopharyngeal, vagal, and spinal sensory. And when we integrate ourselves with others, we're integrating with ourselves. And so if we distance ourselves from others in their home, every man's island and social media, I'm not going to talk to anybody, who doesn't believe like I do, that it actually has a toll on our physical health, and you can actually measure that. And so if you can bring out that, sharpen the lawnmower blade, so to speak, of your own nervous system, you become a more compelling speaker, more able to integrate with empathy with others, and be more influential.
So are you saying you need face-to-face interactions with people?
Yes.
And that via the computer that doesn't activate those facial nerves?
Yeah.
So
You can regulate state two different ways, says Stephen Porges, who wrote polyvagal theory, either with objects or with people. And we live in a world now where we regulate with objects, a screen of some sort, and not with people. So we're losing that ability to, feel what somebody else feels by mirroring their, your face moves, there's mirror neurons that occur within 20th of a second, and you can feel the emotions of others. But if you're distanced from that, you start to get dumb in a sense. You know, your receptive awareness of yourself and with others separate. I think we're, as a society, we're in that.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah.
spiral
Thank you so
downwards.
much. That's extremely
Figure that.
interesting.
You can talk for hours on
What was
that.
that?
Polyvagal theory. Is a good place to start.
Polyvagal theory. If any of you missed that, thank you so much. Anything else? Yes.
I suppose if you struggle having these sorts of conversations, a book that I read a few years ago is called Difficult Conversations. And so it's not just about like this, it's just any conversation that you have difficulty with. And so one of the things that I really took out from it is we have this tendency to blame others, and instead the book talks about talking about systems of contribution, and that we all have contributed to these problems in our own ways. And so instead of blaming others that you're the fault or this is your responsibility, being able to come at it and say, I've done this in the past and I in this way, and it's contributed to climate change and these environmental crises in this way, and I didn't know, and I'm trying to be better and I'm trying to work better. So it's not just you, it's me, and it's all of us.
That's huge, and it's important to know how to have those conversations, especially because we come from oftentimes a place where I know I was not environmentally conscious until I came to college. I used plastic water bottles every day, and I would just throw them in the trash. I wouldn't even recycle them. And I look at myself now, and it's ridiculous. So we have difficult conversations that we need to have, but we need to realize that those conversations need to be had. So thank you. Anything else? Well, thank you all so much for coming to my talk. Again, my name is Taylor Stevens. I work at the Sustainability Office at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. I have my personal contact. This is my email. This is our office's email. And I also put the office phone and my phone on there in case you ever have any questions, if you want to contact me further on what ecopsychology means, or if you really enjoyed this workshop, I would love to hear your feedback. So thank you all so much for coming. Have a great rest of the day.